Recording in progress.
Good evening, colleagues. If you could take your seats, please. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council. We had our council portrait earlier this evening. I must say, all of us, I think, did an amazing job, showing up, which is critical, and all looking our best. So we will hang with all the our predecessors out in the hallway. If any member of the public wants to come look at us in a few years, they're welcome to do so. So with that, Councilor Mickley is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, folks. We are being audio taped and videotaped this meeting. We have no counselors attending remotely. It's a pleasure to see everybody in person. It's wonderful, actually. So with that, we're going to go right to first call. We have two related items in the second call. They are related to the accessory dwelling units, and I do expect we're going to have a fairly extensive discussion on that in the second call. It's a fairly complicated item that the Zoning and Planning Committee has spent a considerable time working on. So with that, Chair Kelly for the Land Use Committee, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are all looking pretty good tonight, aren't we? The Land Use Committee met on March 23rd. We took up the following items. Number 7-25 was held. Number 54-25, which was a request to extend FAR at 35 Village Circle, was approved 8-0. Item 67-25 was we approved a withdrawal without prejudice, which was to waive 8 parking stalls at 1615 Beacon Street. That's the Suzuki School. We approved that unanimously. Number 68-25, oh, sorry, this is on page 65 and 66. I'm on 66 now. Number 68-25, a request to amend a previous special permit to allow a series of retaining walls with a combined height exceeding 4 feet at 298 to 304 Elliott Street. That was approved unanimously, 8-0. And the last item, 69-25, was also held. I would like to request some public hearings, however.
Go ahead and please assign the public hearings.
Page 72 of your City Council docket, I'd like to request a public hearing on April 8th, which is tomorrow. Number 75-25, request to allow a marijuana transporter use at 16 McGuire Court. Also tomorrow. Number 76-25, a request to amend a previous special permit to allow a 3-story structure at 148 Auburndale Ave. And finally, for tomorrow night, a public hearing for number 77-25, which is a request to exceed FAR at 71 Commonwealth Avenue. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Chair Baker for the Zoning and Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the committee report I'm going to give, because the 2 items on second call are already there, is on page 68. The committee met on the 26th, and we have several appointments. An appointment of James O'Connell to the Planning and Development Board. That's item 6125. The appointment of Sean McMillan to the Conservation Commission. That's 6225. Reappointment of Scott Friedman to the Newton Historical Commission. That's 6425. Reappointment of Tamarisha Gamzimbia to the Newton Affordable Housing Trust. That's 6525. And I move the report.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Chair Krinsman for Programs and Services, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report this evening.
Chair Grossman for Public Safety and Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's no report this evening.
Chair Albright for Public Facilities.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report is on page 69. The first item was held, and that will be taken up again, by the way, on May 7th. Yeah, May 7th, the main drain extension on Homer Street. 5825, authorization to expend $750,000 from the current year's stormwater reserve was passed, was approved, 6 in favor, none against. And 6025, her honor the mayor appointing Daniel Manning, 429 Cherry Street, West Newton, to the Sustainable Materials Management Commission for a term to expire April 7th, 2028. And that was approved 6-0, and I move the report.
Thank you. Chair Gentile for finance, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The finance report begins at the bottom of page 69. 3 items to report out. First is 57-25. Her honor the mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend a grant of $20,592 from the Executive Office of Public Safety for the FY 2025 State 9/11 Department Emergency Medical Dispatch Grant Program. That was approved by a vote of 8-0. 58-25, Her honor the mayor requesting authorization to expend the sum of $750,000 from Stormwater Reserve to fund engineering services and design work for stormwater control measures. That was approved 8-0. 59-25. Her honor the mayor requesting authorization to accept and expend the sum of $122,834.30 in a grant from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health to related to the homelessness programs and solutions. This was approved 8-0. I would also like to be recognized to schedule 3 public hearings.
Go ahead, please.
The public hearings can be found on page 75. The first one is 351-24. The submittal of the FY 2026 to FY 2030 capital improvement plan. The hearing is set, all hearings are set for the 5th of May. 82-25, Her honor the mayor submitting the 2026 to 2030 supplemental capital improvement plan. And 83-25, Her honor the mayor submitting the recommended water, sewer, and storm water rates. Again, those are all scheduled for May the 5th. And with that, I would move the report.
Thank you, Chair Gentile. Chair Danberg for real property reuse.
Thank you, Mr. President. There is no report tonight.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs.
Aye.
Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile. Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Malachy.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous 24-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to now turn to the 2 items in second call. I'm going to recognize the Chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee, Counselor Baker. And I understand Counselor Baker is going to have a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation to explain the items that are before us. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just like to suspend the rules to be clear. There is no requirement that we have these information before you 72 hours. That's for committees. But as a matter of process, I think it's important that everybody have access to this. So I so move that we can present this information to you tonight.
There's a motion by Counselor Baker to allow for the supplemental material. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. So these are 2 items that the Zoning and Planning Committee has worked on for a total of 8 meetings. But many of you, as you are members of other committees, may not have tuned in for all of or even part of that discussion. And we have done, I think, a significant amount of work on this. And I want to try and explain what we've done so that everyone is clear on what is being proposed. So there are two items, and as a way of clarifying them, at the request of the president, I worked with the Law and Planning Department to prepare a version of the ordinance which is attached to the committee report, which has yellow highlighting. And the yellow highlighting really is the language that relates to the second item. The first item, just to read it into the record and the votes from the committee, is item 36924, requesting discussion and amendments to accessory dwelling unit ordinance. Her Honor, the Mayor requesting discussion and amendments to Newton's accessory dwelling unit ordinance so that it complies with the State Zoning Act, Chapter 48. That was approved in Committee 8-0. Then the second item is 36924-2, requesting discussion and amendments to accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And this is Zoning and Planning Committee requesting discussion and possible amendments to Chapter 30, zoning regarding accessory dwelling units, ADU, in addition to those needed to comply with recent changes to the State Zoning Act. That passed 5 in favor, 1 opposed, and 2 abstentions. So for purposes of the discussion tonight, I propose that we discuss the items together, but we vote them separately because they can be divided as according with the docket items. So in the matter of how you decide to vote, you would vote in favor if you preferred, and voted in favor of the first item, which is 36924, the original item to make the ordinance conform to state law. You would vote in favor of all the language that is in the handout that is not yellow. And if you want to vote in favor of the second item, you would vote in favor of all the language that is in yellow in the handout. So we'll get to a double set of votes later, but let me provide the background to you that I think is important to understand. Can you put up the first slide, please? You have
recording stop. Recording in progress.
In front of you, but I think it's important that we show these to the public because as opposed to, for example, the MBTA ordinance, which affected a significant minority of the city, this affects virtually all the residential opportunities in the city, and it's important we understand what's going on. So how this came to be is that, and go to the next slide, there was a change in the state law in August that basically provided accessory apartments were to be available of right. And all 900 square foot units are available right now. Newton already had available accessory apartments by right. So this was not anything new. But what is new is that design and dimensional controls can't be specific to accessory apartments. They have to be the same as for residential properties generally and also not be unreasonable. So here are the requirements that we have to follow in order to meet the state requirements follow in our ordinance to meet the state requirements. We have to allow accessory apartment and residential uses, not only in single residence, but in multi-residence and BU 1 and 4 districts where residences are allowed. We have a different measurement. We use what is called habitable space to determine how big a unit is, but the state specified a specific way of measuring, which is based on the building code. And it's basically called the gross floor area. Also, we had provided for less than 50%. The state says that you can have up to 50% of their measurement of the gross floor area. And the slide says 1,000 or 900 square feet. We had 1,000 already for internal accessory units, 900 for detached. And the state requires these standards to be met for at least the 900. The state said, again, the owner occupancy requirement has to be removed for any that are 900 or less. Any occupational limitations. So we, for example, say that we can have no more than 4 unrelated persons living in a dwelling at one time. Otherwise, you need a special permit for an association of persons. They have to be applied to each unit independently, not to the unit as a whole. We had in our current accessory apartment ordinance certain design standards that were designed to make sure that the unit conformed to what the unit of the main building looked like. Those can no longer be used. There was a maximum size and footprint of 700 square feet, And that can no longer be part of it, as well as a front entry requirement, at least for internal ADUs. And because we're talking about the same kind of residential restrictions and dimensional controls, it allows up to 2.5-story ADUs as long as the main building setbacks are met, and 1.5-story ADUs with 5 side and rear setbacks, which is what we do for accessory buildings like a shed or things like that. So those provisions basically now set the standard for what we can require of ADUs. We can't, as our current ordinance provides, ask for a greater setback for an ADU than we would for a shed or a garage. There are some important provisions of our ordinance that remain. The dimensional controls that we have, like FAR, open space, and so forth, apply. And one of the housekeeping items in the ordinance that I worked with the law department to make clear is that those other dimensional controls do apply, and they're not avoided by the changes unless they're specifically set forth or the state law governs. There's also only one ADU per lot. That stays the same. We also maintain, and the state actually includes in its statute, a limitation on short-term rental. Part of the concern that we had originally in the last round of amendments was to prevent these units from being converted into short-term rental, which deprives them of the opportunity to provide long-term housing. And the requirement that both units be in common ownership is still the same. So if you go to the next slide, please. So as a matter of comparison, right now, a detached ADU is a maximum of one. This is before we make any amendments other than the state law requirements. Maximum height of 1.5 stories, maximum footprint 700 square feet, which is normally what you do for a garage. And the setbacks were half the principal building setback, or 7.5 feet, whichever is greater, giving more protection to neighbors than the shed requirements. But now with and I say these proposed amendments because they are what required of us by state law. They're really proposed, but we have to follow the rule of the statute. The maximum height can be 2.5 stories, which is the same as a single family home. The maximum footprint goes away. The minimum side and rear setback, same as a single family home. And if you're not more than 1.5 stories, the setbacks can be no less than 5 feet. Now, all of these slides, by the way, I went through with the planning department to try and make sure that they were accurate. And I drew, in fact, from the planning department's materials as in the process of putting these things together. Now, that's what is essentially required of us. There are additional amendments that the committee discussed, and there was quite an extensive discussion. And Councilor Albright, in particular, took a leadership role, although she disclaimed the leadership role from time to time in this, but nonetheless, she was identified with them. There were amendments that increased the maximum square footage permitted for a by right internal ADU in an existing building. Part of the rationale here is that it has to be, we don't want people tearing down buildings. We want to say, all right, if you want to convert something in existing building, that's okay, but we don't want to see them torn down for this. The owner occupancy provisions are retained for by right detached ADUs for new construction up to 1,200 square feet, because again, there was a concern that in the situation of properties that were being torn down or rebuilt, we wanted to make sure that there was some relationship between the owner and the occupants of the building. The carriage house separation, which we currently have, is eliminated, and the historic review is being done by the Historic District Commissions, but with a prior review by the Historical Commission. There are some additional opportunities for special permit considerations relating to things like screening, parking, and the owner occupancy. And also, there was a change in the invalidity clause. That is not shown in yellow because I had a conversation with the law department, and they indicated that that was good housekeeping and not necessarily part of the proposal. So that is taken out. You don't see that highlighted. But the highlighted text shows you the exact text of that. So to clarify for this proposal that is before you that's coming from the committee would have for internal ADUs, allow up to 1,200 square feet by right. Again, no more than 4 years old, but retain a 1,200 square foot special permit option for newer homes. And for detached ADUs, allow up to 1,200 square feet by right in existing structure more than 4 years old, otherwise like a garage or an accessory building. Again, try and encourage preservation. And a new structure, if the ADU or main building is owner occupied. For special permits for larger ADUs, the council acting through the land use committee can consider owner occupancy, screening and parking, and that the unit complement the principal dwelling in the sense of design, although that's not, that's a term of art to say complement because we didn't want to get into too many specifics. Finally, the other amendment about historic carriage houses, they are allowed already all over the city without a special permit. But now they will be allowed within historic districts, but the historic district still must approve the exterior changes. And for many people who do not realize it, historic district commissions have the ability to modify dimensional requirements if it's in the historic interest of the decision. They would remove the 15-foot separation requirement from abutting homes for conversion of carriage houses. Right now, if you want to convert a carriage house, but it's closer than 15 feet, you can't do that in order to try and provide a buffer with the residents nearby. That would go away. And again, the invalidity provision that I indicated has gone. I want to just indicate that all of this work would not have been possible, not only with with the members of the committee, but also Ms. Cairo from the planning department played a powerful and important role. Ms. Wilson was the primary member of the law department involved, although Mr. Lee has been involved. And also we had Ms. Norton, you know, has been our able committee clerk, but she has now been succeeded by Ms. Holden. And I'm really grateful to both of them for all their work, as well as the vice chair, Councilor Oliver, who's spent a lot of time on this, as well as all the members of the committee. So now that's, I think, the conclusion of the report. I put this on second call so I could speak on it. I will just indicate that in committee, I was the sole vote against the second part of the item 2, because I believe it provides insufficient protection for neighbors in the process of what we're doing. But I will reserve my comments on the merits till later because I'd like other people to have an opportunity to talk. But at the conclusion of the discussion, Mr. Chairman, I think it's important that we have the 2 separate votes with roll call so that we can decide what to do. I would like to vote in favor of the items that are required, but I have real misgivings about the remainder. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Baker, for a very thorough presentation on a complicated topic. And thanks to the committee for clearly a lot of effort that's gone into that. Councilor Albright, did you want to go first here?
I just wanted to be clear that I think there's one thing that is highlighted in yellow that was originally part of the changes that we made to comply with the state. And that was that in our old ordinance, we allowed internal ADUs to be 1,000 square feet. And so that was sort of moved over into the version of that was in compliance with the state. So that was added not as an amendment later, but that was part of the original ordinance, which we were passing to be in compliance with the state. That's the only change that I would make from in this yellow stuff.
Go ahead.
Just
Hold on.
clarify.
Councilor Baker, you can respond through the.
Yeah,
process.
I don't think that's modified. I think that the internal accessory is 1,000 square feet. It's only that the 900 referred to the detached. That was the law department took a look at this and they verified that this was what was the difference between what was required and what was new. So that's all.
Right. Councilor Albright, do you want to, I'll reserve time for you. You can still speak to the substance of the amendments if you like. We are going to discuss this collectively, folks, to move the discussion along. Councilor Kalis next. Councilor Albright? You're on a hold. Okay, Councilor Kalis.
This is more a question process to you. Can we move the state required items first and vote on that?
We certainly can if that's.
Get that out of the way.
If that's the will of the council, I'm very happy to do that.
Okay, that
Is there any objection to doing that? Councilor Albright.
So I think we discussed this in committee as a package. And yes, we have to have 2 separate votes because there were 2 separate docket items. That's how it was docketed. But I would like to discuss it as a package as opposed to let's get one passed and see what happens to the rest.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so let's just discuss them collectively. Look, folks, we don't need to, I presume we don't need to spend much, if any, time discussing the portions of the changes that are required to comply with state laws, something we have to do. I think we can all take that as a given. And a vote probably in some ways will be a formality, I would think. So let's address the proposed amendments, although comments on the entire ordinance are in order. Anyone wish to be heard? Counselor Baker.
I'll yield to others because I think it's important that other members of the council, we've tried as a committee to really present the information to you, but let me just explain my misgivings with the amendments. The challenge this poses for us is that when we're talking about creating larger units as of right, and that's the issue that is the main question, that and owner occupancy in terms of the amendments. I think owner occupancy is one of those provisions that tends to make these units work in the neighborhood. All of the existing accessory apartments we have in the city that have been permitted with an owner occupancy requirement. Doing away with that going forward I understand is required for state law for units under 900 square feet and 1,000 in the internals, 900 detached and 1,000 internal. But I do think it's an important safeguard. If there were sentiment in favor of retaining it more than the committee did, I would support an amendment to that effect. But I think that helps make these units fit in with the neighbors and the context that in which they are found. The other concern I have is just size. We have over 600 units in the city, according to the assessors, that are larger than 1,200 square feet, as I recall, maybe 15, but certainly they're houses of this scale. And we're creating an opportunity for someone to build a structure 2.5 stories, 7.5 feet away from a lot line next to a neighbor. And that is going to happen. And the only question is how big that's going to be. And so that's the reason for my reservations. But again, I want other people to express their views because this is a collective decision. This is one of those cases where I think the role of the committee is to try and put together as much information for you as you can, but let the council make this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Baker. Counselor Downs.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to commend the Zoning and Planning Committee for, I haven't followed it live, but I have followed your reports and discussed it. I think this is a good move forward and will allow people who have or are anticipating mobility needs to build a unit on their property big enough for them to live in and to make adaptive and accessible. We heard from several constituents by email who are hoping to do a 1,200 square foot, 1 floor accessory unit on their property. They have the room for it if we pass this, and that would allow them to remain in Newton and in their community. For me, it's as much about the people as it is about the structures. You've had good people in, you have good neighbors, you have a tight community. And I hope we pass this as is. And if you want to make additional adjustments, if problems come up, this is something I trust the committee can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Downs. Anyone else wish to be heard on the item? Counselor Lipoff.
I think after probably 8 meetings of the Zoning and Planning Committee, they did fantastic work. I'm so proud that we did an ADU ordinance far ahead of the state's recommendation to do so. I love the amendments that were brought to this, and I think it's in a great place. And I'm looking forward to voting on it tonight.
Thank you. Counselor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also did follow this either remotely or through the meeting minutes. The Zoning and Planning Committee did tremendous work, and they really thoroughly went through this. And I think they hit the right tone with this. We have a lot of people with needs for housing, families and extended families. And we received a lot of letters asking us to include the amendments that Councilor Albright had brought forth. The committee, I saw the vote was 5 approve, and there were 2 counselors that abstained. And Councilor Baker was the lone no vote. So I'm really very much inclined to go with the will of the Zoning and Planning Committee that's put all this time and effort into it. And as has been said, we can make changes to this at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Larry. Counselor Kelly.
Well, I raised my hand right as Counselor Leary was saying everything I wanted to say. I also followed it. I attended some of the meetings. They did a huge, thorough job. And I will be casting my vote in support of the majority vote of ZAP for tonight because I thank them for their work and I think they made really good progress and I agree with all of the proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Oliver.
Great. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of quick points. I think I heard a number being thrown out a minute ago regarding the size of the units that we are moving up to at 1,200 square feet. Today in the city of Newton, not ADUs, but just housing units. We have today over 2,500 housing units that are below 1,200 square feet. So from an ADU perspective or an accessory dwelling perspective, we have over 2,500 families living in housing that is below 1,200 square feet. We're going to go up to 1,500 square feet by special permit in a detached accessory dwelling unit. And because of the state law, we now have to allow those structures to be up to 2.5 stories tall at 7.5 feet off the property line. Just to kind of, and by the way, these are no longer accessory dwelling units as they were explained to me when I joined the council as to what they were. These are now rental units. Anyone can move into that ADU, just for clarification. These are no longer owner occupied, only one of the 2 units is required to be owner occupied. And then when you get into a special permit situation, we can even waive that as a council. Between last week and this afternoon at around 3 o'clock, I'm not quite sure how many revisions or conversations Chair Baker had with legal, planning, legal, then planning again, then myself and a few others, and then planning and legal again. I received a handful of questions from people in this room as well as other constituents. I'd like to make a motion that we recommit this to ZAP because I couldn't answer the questions that I was receiving. They're legit questions, but questions I won't be able to answer tonight or get an answer to.
So there's a motion to recommit. Is there a second to that motion? The second one.
And by the way, I should clarify that I'm only talking about the parens 2.
I understand
not the
that.
State requirements.
There's a motion to recommit the second portion, parens 2. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Counselor Maliki. All right. So we are now going to discuss whether to recommit or not. That's the motion before us. And we'll vote on that. And then if it's recommitted, that goes back. If it's not recommitted, we go back to the main item. Counselor Albright.
So I have a feeling that after 8 meetings, I think, I would hope that we all knew what we were talking about, but it apparently didn't quite work that way. I just want to point out that nobody is requiring anybody to build an ADU for 1,200 square feet. And we are always going to be protected by the FAR requirements and zoning. That didn't change. And we're also going to be protected by the open space requirements. So you can't go bigger than is required by FAR, and you can't go bigger than was required by the open space requirements. So back to the fact that, the 50% rule, that didn't come up, but if you have a house that's, let's say it's 1,500 square feet, you can't build a 1,200 square foot ADU because it's 1,200 square feet or 50%, whichever is smaller. So nobody's going to go out and build a 1,200 square foot ADU next to a 1,500 square foot house. It won't happen. It can't happen by ordinance. These ADUs, the reason why we only have 121 ADUs after 40 years of having such an ordinance, and many of those, by the way, were created in the last revision of this ordinance when all of the illegal apartments in Newton were able to come in and become legal apartments. So a good number of those 121 ADUs already existed in the city and were finally legalized because of the changes that we made to the ordinance. So it's very expensive to build these things, even an internal one, but certainly an external one. You have to have a kitchen, you have to have bathrooms. And to build a 900 square foot house with a kitchen and a bathroom, perhaps that needs to be accessible for some people that need accessibility, is very expensive. And that's why we don't have a lot of them. As it happened, we had an email from a person that they're building an ADU next to their house. They live in Ward 3. They need an accessible bedrooms and accessible bathrooms and an accessible kitchen. And they simply couldn't get it all into a 900 square foot building. And they want to get it done by this coming fall because their son is going to move into their house with his family, and they're going to move into the ADU that's going to be fully accessible. And they are very thankful that we passed an ordinance that allows them to do this 1,200 square foot ordinance that allows them to build their ADU by right and get it done in time for their family needs. I don't think we need to send this back to committee. I think the folks in the committee had their points of view. And I don't know that they're going to be changing by sending it back to committee. I do want to explain why Councilor Danberg and I.
You're out of time,
May
Councilor
I have
Albright.
30 seconds more.
You may. All in favor of giving Councilor Albright another minute, please say aye. Aye, opposed? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just want to explain why Councilor Danberg and I abstained. When the amendment was to allow by right an external ADU from 1,000 to 1,200 square feet to allow that by right. And the committee added on that if we do that, it had to be owner occupied. Either the owner has to live in the main house or the ADU. And I think both of us abstained for the same reason, that we didn't want to add that requirement. And there are several good reasons for that. What happens if the person passes away that owns the property? It goes to the children. Then the children say, well, in order to keep the ADU and the house, we have to move there. That makes no sense. They've got a house in Newton. They don't want to move into the other house. So now we've made a requirement. We're probably going to lose the ADU because of that requirement. But I was going to vote for it tonight because it's important to get this whole ordinance going and move it forward. So even though it has things in it that I wasn't happy with, I was going to vote for it. And I hope that we will pass this tonight in the hopes that maybe we'll get a few more ADUs to add to the 121 we've only had in the last 40 years. And
Thank you, Councilor Albright.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Kalis, Danberg. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Remember, this is on the motion to recommit, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. There is no way that I want to recommit this, to have to talk about it again.
Is that the end of your commentary?
No. But just the process, I think that there are people that already spoke about how well this whole discussion was led by the chair and vice chair of ZAP. 8 times, I think we talked about it. And it wasn't just in general high lofty, it was detailed. It was straw votes. It was debate. It was compromise. And I feel like it's done. We've cooked it. It's totally done. And I'm really proud of the result. I think every time we run, one of the biggest things or major items that we talk about with constituents is affordable housing. Well, this is it. Like, this helps move that needle forward. And I think the compromises that were made really are going to make a difference. And if they don't, then we change them. But I think this is ready to go. So I'm a hard no.
Thank you, Counselor Kalis. I have Counselor Danberg, Lipoff, Leary again, please, if you would confine your remarks to whether we ought to recommit or not. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you to my colleague from Ward 8 for saying that there's no way that he would want to recommit this, because I feel that way also. We have cooked this, folks. We have had 8 meetings on this. This is done. It is ready to stick a fork in it. We are ready to vote this out tonight. There is no reason that we have to drag this back and bring it back to committee. Nobody, I won't say nobody wants to bring it back, because obviously we've got a request to bring it back. But I see no reason to bring this back. We did some wonderful compromising in order to get this bill to where it is. I'm not entirely happy with it. As Councillor Albright has said, we brought up, well, what happens if an older person is living in the main house or in the ADU, the older person passes away, there is a rental, if the rental is the ADU or the main house, the children that now own the house have to move into the house or they have to leave that vacant. And it's not right. But in the interest of passing this tonight, we don't have to get everything that we want. None of us have everything that we want. There were 8 different points of view on many of these items that we have brought up. We got to a compromise. It is on the floor, ready to go. Let's vote this out.
Thank you. I have Counselor Lipoff, Leary, Maliki, Baker.
You know, when you work so closely with your colleague, you finish each other's sentences, and that's what you just did. In my mind, he stood up and he finished the sentence about running for office and hearing the complaints. The complaints are, we need more affordable housing. It's also the process to do anything in this city takes too long. And I think that leadership in a committee from the chair and the vice chair is coming to resolution, bringing something to this council after the votes that we had to pass it. And if you don't like one piece of it, you know, or you want to add some amendments at the last minute, I just don't think that that's the right thing to do. This is fully baked. I agree with the speakers before. There are opportunities to amend and to do things after the fact, but I don't know what you do after 8 meetings. And they will run beautifully by the 2 of you. So I don't understand why we're here talking about spending more time on it.
Thank you. Counselor Leary.
I don't support recommittal to the zoning and planning committee, and you can all thank me later for that. And I think everything's been said. I won't repeat what my colleagues have already eloquently expressed.
Short is always very eloquent. Counselor Maliki.
Thank you. I'd just like to take issue with a couple of the comments that were made. First of all, the idea that FAR is a sort of safety measure. What I hear from people is that what's going up is too big, and that's because our FAR limits are, I think, too high. So this is just splitting up the mass between the main house and a second house, but you still got the same FAR. The other thing and I heard the discussion during some of the ZAP meetings about the owner dies, the children don't want to move into the house, but the thing to do is sell the house. There's a third option here. And that, to me, that sort of compounds the problem of the state forcing us to get rid of the owner occupancy on the under 900 square feet category of detached ADUs or any ADUs. I think I agree with Councillor Baker that the owner occupancy should be kept wherever we have it, because that's as much safeguard as we can get against kind of the tenant from hell. If the person who owns the property is there living with the tenant, either in their internal or external ADU, they have much more incentive to correct any problems rather than leaving them to be inflicted on the neighbors. And related to that, allowing what's called here an indirect property owner, which I had not heard that term during the earlier discussion, allowing that to count as an owner, I think just increases the problem of not having a kind of a responsible person there who's going to suffer any bad effects from a unpleasant tenant. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Malachy. Again, on the motion to recommit, Councilor Baker, Councilor Oliver, and then seeing no one else, I'm going to call for a vote. Go ahead. Oh,
Let me yield
Councilor
to my
Getz.
colleagues. I'll come back to them.
I'm sorry, you're going to defer, Councilor Baker? Councilor Oliver? All right, Councilor Lucas and then Getz, please. If you keep doing that, I'm going to shut you all off. So go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we're here for this motion. We're not talking about the merits of what's in front of us, the work done by zoning and planning. It's to refer this back to get answers to questions, if I'm understanding that correct, right? I don't think I heard you say that you want to change this or change that. Is that correct? Yeah, so we're not talking about changing anything, folks. Just get some answers to some questions. This is, I mean, I don't want to say this is easy. There's a lot of moving parts in this. Attach, detach, what the state is requiring, what we're doing extra. You know, we just want some more answers to some questions. That's it. That's all that we're doing. And that's all that Councilor Oliver was asking for. I don't see why that's a big deal. I have no doubt that this is going to pass. If we send this back to committee and this comes back here, it's going to pass. It's just a couple more weeks, another month or so. That's it. I mean, I don't see what the big deal is. Granted, I don't serve on ZAP. I serve on land use, but I don't see what the big deal is. Let's send this back to committee, get some answers to some questions, and then it comes back here and we'll vote on it. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Getz, and then I'll go back to Councilors Baker and Oliver.
Okay, I actually, the first thing I want to say is that I commend the Zoning and Planning Committee because yes, a lot of work was done in the committee and a good compromise happened within the committee itself. I am concerned as Councilor Oliver is because I think that there is a pretty large loophole in this ordinance at this moment. And I would much rather that it be fixed now rather than later. I'm also concerned that we didn't do the type of analysis that we need in terms of the implications of putting this in place. Because I think that there is a certain vulnerability of certain residential district designation. And I would much rather see this work done now rather than have a year from now find out that we do have loopholes and we do have problems. We've spent a considerable amount of time on this, and I appreciate everybody suggesting that it's fully baked, but it's not. And I would suggest that, you know, the piece, the parens 1 is the one that's appropriate to approve this evening because it brings us into alignment with the state, which is already in effect and in place right now.
Thank you, Councilor Getz. Councilors Baker, then Oliver. I think that's it unless someone else wants to be heard.
Mr. Chairman, I have very mixed emotions about this emotion since we've spent so much time on it, obviously, but I will support it just to make sure that the questions get answered in case they do modify our decision. I think they will modify it modestly if we modify it at all, but I do think it's important that we be very clear on what we're doing so that everyone else is clear as we've tried to make it clear about the main item tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Oliver.
Great. Thank you again, Mr. President. So yeah, to the members of the ZAP committee. Yeah, I hear you. I don't necessarily want to go back for a bunch of additional meetings either. And like Councilor Lucas just mentioned, I'm not looking to make broad sweeping changes here. Although I did get hit up with a couple of questions today, I'm not quite sure they rise to the degree of a loophole, but there are questions I couldn't answer. I do want to get answers to that. If we don't want to send it back to committee, there's only one other thing I can do here, and I'll charter the item and get the items or the questions answered myself. So I'll just charter the item. That'll limit me to 2 weeks worth of, dramatic delay and size in the room and all
So are
that,
you
but I'm
chartering-
chartering this item.
Are you chartering both items or just?
Sorry, I'm only talking about parens 2.
All right, so the Parens 2 has been chartered. Parens 1 is still up for a vote. Is there any further discussion on Parens 1 this evening? All right, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll on Parens 1?
Counselor Albright.
If you have a procedural question, that's the only thing in order right now.
I'm very concerned that one part will go through without the other part, so I'd like to charter both items.
All right, discussion's ended. Thank you, Counselor Albright. We will take both items up at our next regularly scheduled meeting of the city council. Okay, thank you all.